We took an agency from 30K a month all the way to 130K a month in just 90 days. And we didn't do it by guessing. We didn't try different random funnels or random strategies. We didn't test random tactics or methods that we have heard about. We made just really 5 simple, specific changes in very specific order. And if you even get one of these wrong, scaling breaks. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly what we did. This is not going to be about theory, giving you some fluff or some advice. We're going to walk through what we actually installed inside the business. We will cover like why we didn't start with ads or funnels like most agencies actually do, how we identified the real bottleneck before we start building the system that we actually chose and why that one system really mattered, the risk factor we control before scaling anything and before we agree to anything, and how we turn unpredictable revenue into an actual system. Each step builds on the next step followed. If we skipped one, this wouldn't actually work and I wouldn't be making this video. So let's start with the first thing we did, and this is where most people already go wrong. So the first thing we actually did, we stopped guessing and we ran a full diagnostic of the actual business. The first thing we do is always, we stop all the tactical decisions, right? We don't go looking for the funnel that the client will need. We don't look for the ad angles that we will be building. We don't look to what we exactly need to change. We run a full diagnostic across all 4 areas of the business. First one, demand, conversion, delivery, and decision making, because we don't choose strategy based on actual opinions or based on what we strongly believe needs to be happening, or, oh, look, like there's a competitor that's really doing great. Let's just rip off his funnels. Let's just rip off his ads and install in this business and hopefully it will work out for this business. That's exactly what most agencies do. We don't do it because with these type of strategies, these type of tactics and methods, you really have a high failure rate. We choose the system based on the lowest score. What does that mean? Okay. So we have a rule. The system path is really followed by the lowest diagnostic score and there's no exceptions. So before we run a full intake form that takes all the information about the business. All that information reveals demand, conversion, delivery, decision making. We run that to a really high AI system that really automatically identifies and indicates and really pinpoints what is the lowest score in the system and why that specific business system is lacking. So let's say we ran for his specific business and the lowest score was the actual demand, okay? And that's exactly what happened here as well, was that the lowest score was actually demand. So we ignore everything else, we close eyes on conversion, delivery, decision making, and the only thing that we will be actually building and making and creating is actual demand, okay? And once we saw that that score is the lowest score, which obviously I just told you was demand, the path really becomes obvious because we don't guess, the system really reveals of what we need to do. But here's the mistake most agencies make and most people make, right? They will try to fix everything. We don't try to fix everything. We really diagnose the business and we see where is the actual constraint currently sitting in, and we try to remove it before we move on to fixing something else. So most agencies, what they do is they believe that the client came because the client needs to change absolutely everything and we need to get him XYZ results, and the only way to get it is if we change everything, because obviously he wouldn't be here if his business would be producing those results. And that's where usually most people go wrong. First, what we do, we actually diagnose to make sure of what is the lowest working part in the actual business. And then we only do one thing, we fix the lowest working part in the business. So in this instance, we fixed one thing, which was the actual demand, right? The diagnostic showed that demand was the weakest part of the business, which explained everything that was happening to the business. And we understood that from the perspective of the actual business owner himself. He said, hey, leads inconsistent. We also saw the leads were inconsistent. Revenue really unpredictable. Pipeline was really unstable. So we ignored everything else, like I already mentioned. And we focus only on one thing that matters for that specific business, which is demand. So we installed a demand constraint actual system inside of the business, because if demand is broken, nothing else really matters. We can't concentrate on conversion because you not have enough demand coming in the business. We can't concentrate on delivery because there's not enough clients in the business, okay? And there's no way to concentrate also on decision making because we don't have a huge visibility because there's a system actually currently broken in the business. So now here's where most agencies mess it up. Even if they pick the right system, let's say like, hey, we don't have demand, and they say like, okay, so let's just build out demand, let's just run ads or whatever it is, they build the wrong execution. Maybe they pick the right system, what they need. They're like, hey, let's just build out the VSL, or let's just do this, or XYZ. They build a wrong execution, okay? What we do, we install a system, not just a random actual funnel. Most agencies, they go to competitors that are doing really well, they look at their funnels, they rip them off, they rip off their ads, they rip off everything else, and they try to install into their actual clients' businesses, which usually, I would say about 90% of the time, fail. And the reason they fail, because their business model, their revenue, their target audience, there's a lot of different things also working behind the scenes that the actual agency is not seeing. What we do, we completely take the factor out of looking at what the competitors do. We completely take the factors out of what everybody else is doing, and we just concentrate on the most thing that really matters, which is the client's actual business, okay? So we didn't build a funnel, we installed a complete system, and because demand was constrained, the structure was already defined. So what exactly did we build? We built a landing page with diagnostic actual hook, a VSL that broke false beliefs and explained the bottleneck, and here's the kicker with a VSL. To really crack the code on the VSL, it sometimes takes more than just one time building a VSL out and just like, hey, I get it on the first time. And I can honestly tell you, with experience of a couple of years of kind of trying to crack the code VSL, what best works on VSLs is that you break down their false beliefs or why they strongly believe that this will not work for them, okay? Or why they strongly believe, or why they have not been capable of getting the results what they currently want. Then we also installed an application page with strict filtering, and this is where most agencies also go wrong, because they follow they understand that they need a qualifying process, but they don't follow really strict guidelines. They kind of like, hey, look, like he maybe doesn't have revenue in the business, let's say minimum revenue 10, 50K, and they look at it like, hey, he's just making 5K, but you know what? He says he wants it, he's dedicated, he's boom, 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 and you jump on a call and you end up like acknowledging what you already knew when you looked at the application, was that he didn't have the actual finance. And because he didn't have the finance, you just wasted entirely those 45 minutes on the actual call. So if you have a specific avatar, right, and you already have guidelines and conditions around who you want to be talking to, strictly stay to that one avatar. Don't try to think that, hey, maybe this potentially could be a good fit or not fit. Don't run your entire qualification process on your emotions. Run it based on actual systems. If you have agreed that XYZ type of client needs to come in, then XYZ client has to come in, not an ABC client, okay? And then we also installed the booking flow with controlled scheduling. So overall, a landing page with diagnostic hook, a VSL that broke false beliefs and explained the bottleneck, an application page with strict filters, and a booking flow with actual controlled scheduling, okay? So we then focus on adding extra workflows, extra smart funnels, extra triggers, extra like CRM systems, none of the complexities that will overwhelm the business owner or the actual business itself. Because we follow a simple rule: you only build what the system requires. And this is where most people lose it. They overbuild instead of actually installing, but even with the right system, they can still sometimes fail because, and this is the part almost nobody talks about, we control the guarantee risk before scaling. What does that look like, okay? So most agencies would just accept absolutely every single client that they can potentially get their hands on. Before we accept the client, we take them through the intake form, which is the intelligence form, and that diagnoses all the four things, right? Demand, conversion, delivery, decision-making. Based on this, we also will calculate the score of what is the actual risk of fulfilling this client, or what is the risk of failing to fulfill this client. And so in this way, we minimize the risk on our end also. And this is where we kind of have edge over every other agency, because every other agency would just accept anybody. What we do, we don't accept everybody because we want to make sure that we can really install a system that will change and get the results what the business owner actually wants. And the only way of doing that when we look at the businesses, because every single business that comes to us carries completely different type of risk. And if that risk is not calculated, we are putting our heads on the line and failing most of the times. So before we actually give a guarantee, we calculate what is the actual risk of fulfilling that specific client, okay? So, which is the probability of the business actually failing, okay? Even if we execute perfectly, And this changed how we operate completely as well. Even if we do it perfectly, everything like we install all the systems, there is still a way that that client can actually fail, okay? So we try to really calculate what that risk actually is before we go and fulfill. So we looked at execution discipline, structural stability, offer strength, delivery capacity, and market demand. And then we made the adjustments, okay? We tightened qualification, removed low quality leads, reduced variabilities, and increased actual control over the business. Because if you scale fragile business, you don't really grow, you just break the business itself. Because most of the times what agencies think, and what our business owners think, is like, hey, let me run ads. But if you have a really weak system inside of your business, what ends up happening, you expose that system to a much higher scale. So now, once again, risk was controlled, and because risk was controlled, it was much easier for us to actually fulfill that client and guarantee them the actual results. We could finally do what most people start with, okay? With the actual systems, installations, and funnels and everything else. So we built the control demand with actual ads. Only after the system was in place, we turned on the ads, right? But not to scale fast, to create control. We ran one platform, which was Meta, one audience, 3 to 5 creatives, and $20 to $50 a day ad spend budget, okay? And every ad followed one rule: diagnose the problem, right? We didn't teach, we didn't entertain, we didn't try to impress with big names, landing big names on what we tried to work. We tried to really diagnose the problems of our target audience that they were currently facing. In that way, they want to learn more, and then they jump on a VSL, and then the VSL does the rest of the job to get them to actually book in, right? So we just simply diagnose, because that's what brings in a qualified demand when you start focusing on the actual situations than just a focused target avatar. There's a difference between ads, that one ad could be focusing on just an avatar saying, hey, B2B SaaS ad agencies. Another one could be just describing the specific situation that B2B SaaS ad agency is really going through currently. And sometimes that specific situation is converting much higher than just calling out the actual avatar itself, okay? There's a golden nugget for you guys. So once all 5 pieces were in place, everything started to compound. So within 90 days, we went from 30 to 58K, then to 84K, to 112K, to 130K. And now Sam is really sitting on 500K per month, but that's like over 237 days. But in the 90 days, we scaled his business to 130K. But more importantly, the pipeline became predictable and sales also stabilized, and the founder stepped out from the actual chaos itself because the business was running mostly on actual systems. And that's the real result inside of the business. So what I want you to do right now to implement this exact section that we just spoke about, I want you to apply what we did and follow this order, right? I want you to run a full diagnostic and find your lowest system. How do you run a full diagnostic? You can even go to AI. It doesn't matter what AI you have available. You can go to the same ChatGPT, Claude, whatever it is, and ask it to really diagnose your entire business systems by asking you certain questions, okay? And then what's going to happen is gonna give you like questions that you will need to answer. And based on those questions you answer, it's going to diagnose your business. And it was going to tell you what's your weakest point currently inside of your business. Then what I want you to do is focus only on that system. Ignore everything else and just focus on that. Install the correct structure, like no extra funnel, don't try to do, but just a structure and one demand system that will help you to fix that. Then, control the risk before actually scaling, right? Fix fragility first before you scale. If you see that you have fixed demand before you scale, look at your delivery. Can your delivery be actually standardized before you scale? Because if you don't standardize your delivery, what ends up happening is usually you add more clients, you add more pressure, more stress, and then delivery starts to break, okay? And then run controlled demand, not aggressive scaling. So here's exactly what we did. We stopped guessing and diagnosed. We identified demand as the actual bottleneck. We installed demand system, and we control guarantee risk, and we created predictable demand with actual ads, okay? If you want the exact system we use to take this agency from 30K all the way to 130K a month, go to my Instagram. The link is in the description and the YouTube, and DM me roadmap, and I will send you a full free breakdown that shows you exactly where your business actually is breaking right now, which system you currently need to install inside of your business, and your step-by-step path to actually 100K a month based on your current stage. That's nothing to do with fluff, no guessing, not just vague actual advice, really tailored specifically to the stage where you currently is. Just clear path from where you are to predictable growth and how you can get to 100K a month. And if you really enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel because I post about 1 to 3 times long form content on my channel every single week, which will help you to really understand what does it take to actually scale your business, what type of systems you need to be installed, what does predictable growth really looks like, and how you should be actually thinking about your business.